Buha!
Yo, yo, I'm Jovan Buha, Lakers beat writer for The Athletic, and welcome to another Lakers postgame reaction show. Just got back from the Delta Center, where the Lakers fell 131 to 119. Their 6-game win streak was snapped by the Jazz. They go into the All-Star break at 32-20. They are the number 5 seed in the West. Houston has jumped them to be the number 4 seed. And the Lakers have won 12 of 15 going into the break. So I know this was a disappointing dud of a loss, and we will touch on a lot that went wrong tonight. But I want to keep some perspective here and talk about the big picture and talk about coming out of the All-Star break and what to expect over the final 30 games of the season. But before we get started, you guys know the drill. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to download. It's been a long couple weeks, but please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. Shout out to everybody in the chat. Shout out to the late night gang. Going a little bit earlier than normal. It's before 11 p.m. Pacific time. So did have to write tonight, and obviously was working in the locker room and talking to people and waiting until Dalton and Luka went a little bit later. But glad that you are all joining us. And again, shout out to the late night gang. One other thing I wanted to mention before I start with the overarching takeaway is I am going to be doing a Buha's Block meetup on Sunday to watch the All-Star game. I've not picked the location yet, but it is likely going to be in Mid-City in Los Angeles at a sports bar near where I live. So I will be posting that most likely in a community note and then also on X. So for those who are interested in meeting up for the All-Star game on Sunday night, I will be posting the location and those in LA. And then for people in other places, I know some people were saying East Coast or even out of the country. Like, if you guys want to do meetups on the road, I'll be at the rest of the Lakers road games the rest of the way. Let me know, and I will try to arrange those either at the games if you guys are there or somewhere else. But would love to meet as many of you as possible. Everyone that has been listening and watching and supporting, and would love to take some photos and have a beer with the late night gang. So just wanted to say all that before we get into the overarching takeaway of the game. So overarching takeaway of the game for me is the Lakers have won 12 of 15 games. And I know that this was a disappointing loss. I know that really, like, this group has not had a lot of losses like this. Like, I'm about to pull up the standings here, but looking at their record against below 500 teams, they're 18-8. And that record was, for a large portion of the season, they only had a couple losses against teams below 500. And even then, some teams have done worse lately to drop below 500, and that's affected the Lakers' record against those types of teams. Like Miami has dipped below 500, Orlando's dipped below 500, Atlanta has been on that borderline. Of course, San Antonio's there. So some of this has also been a more recent thing where some of the, because that record against 500 teams and above and below is dependent on the other teams. So if all the above 500 teams they beat start to lose and go under 500, then that affects that record and vice versa. So within the context of everything, the Lakers have been pretty good against bad teams this season. They just blew out this Jazz team. So I don't want to overreact to a game in which Jackson Hayes gets injured in the first quarter, does not return, for a team that's already depleted on the front line. Jared Vanderbilt and Gabe Vincent both missed. Not Jared Vanderbilt. Dorian Finney-Smith and Gabe Vincent both missed the game. And you see the immediate impact. That's two of the Lakers' 3 best defenders alongside Jared Vanderbilt. And not having those two guys and the 50-plus minutes that they provide off the bench, I think really compromised the perimeter defense tonight. So I know that, it was a bad loss. I'm not going to mince words or try to put lipstick on a pig here. Like, it was a bad loss, but it was the final game going into the All-Star break. Guys are like, Dalton has been going through a lot. Obviously, Luka is still trying to get settled in LA. LeBron is about to be headed to San Francisco for All-Star weekend. Dalton is going to be there as well. JJ was talking about, like, has to file all these insurance claims this weekend and, like, try to find an apartment or somewhere to live and move out of the hotel. So, like, I think there was a lot of external things at play as well, in addition to, again, LA was basically down 3 of their top 8 rotation players tonight. And I still think they could have and should have won this game. But I don't think this is a team that has the depth to withstand losing 3 of their top 8 players. Because, again, Jackson Hayes, Dorian Finney-Smith, and Gabe Vincent all basically missed. I mean, Jackson played 7 minutes. Like, he basically, for all intents and purposes, missed the game. And because at that point, it was, I mean, what was his final plus minus here? I'm going to go back to the box score. I mean, the Lakers were +2 and Jackson 7 minutes. So for the time that Jackson was on the floor, the Lakers actually won. And had Jackson played 25, 28 minutes, I think, I'm not saying they win this game, but I do think it's probably closer with how bad the Alex Len minutes went, which I will touch on. But overarching takeaways, like, this team has been playing really good basketball, really, honestly, like, great basketball for the most part over the past 15 games again. And I don't want to overlook that just because they drop a game like this. Like, this happens. Great teams lose games like this. Good teams lose games like this. JJ talked about the human element of blowing out a team and then playing them again 2 days later on the road and just thinking it's going to be easy. And I think there was an element of that, of they just kind of let go of the rope. And we have seen sometimes with this group, kind of going back to last season and earlier this season, they can go through the motions a little bit. And I think that was part of it tonight. But I think even looking at, like, Dorian has played more 4 and 5 for LA recently. Jackson's obviously the starting center. And this is a giant front line with Utah between Kessler, Markkanen, and Collins. And that's not even mentioning some of their bench guys, but, like, you need a requisite level of size to compete with them. And I just don't think the Lakers had some size out there, but it was not the requisite caliber of size to compete with Utah. So I think that was just a big part of it. Again, I think different circumstances. Like, if this is game 10 for Luka versus game 2, maybe the rhythm and the flow of the offense is a little bit different, and LA can overcome being shorthanded, being undersized. But I thought tonight it was just really on the defensive end. You just felt like Utah was punishing them in the paint, punishing them with offensive rebounds. They were getting so many lobs and just finishing at the rim. And it was just like, I think it was too much for LA to ultimately overcome. But looking at the last 15 games on NBA.com/stats, LA is 6th in offense, 4th in defense, and 4th in net rating. And the 3 teams ahead of them in net rating are OKC, Denver, and Cleveland. Boston is the team directly behind them at number 5. They're 0.1 points per 100 possessions better than Boston. So, like, that's kind of what I've been saying. Like, to me, those are the top 5 teams in the league right now. I think OKC, Cleveland, and Boston are probably on their own tier, but I think the Lakers and Nuggets are, like, right there in that probably top of the second group. And that's a great class for LA to be in. So I think big picture, like, I'm trying to maintain some perspective here of, yes, this was a bad loss. Yes, a lot went wrong. Yes, there were some things to be discouraged by, but I think the Lakers are rolling into the All-Star break, playing great basketball. They found an identity, and I just think this was one of those losses that, like, sometimes it happens. You don't excuse it, and I think there are lessons to be learned, but big picture, I think the Lakers are going to be just fine. And there's also some things that I was encouraged by from tonight's game. So let's get into the stat of the night. To me, this encompassed everything. Lakers go 17 of 30 from the free throw line, 56.7%. That is inexcusable. They almost missed half of their free throws. Like, that is just, and they got a lot of free throws. 30 free throws is a high number. and to only make 17 of them. Rui goes 0 for 1. LeBron goes 2 for 4. Luka goes 1 for 5, which was pretty shocking. Austin goes 6 for 8. Vando goes 0 for 2. Bronny goes 1 for 2. Dalton goes 1 for 2. So it was like good free throw shooters, bad free throw shooters, mediocre free throw shooters. Everyone was missing free throws for the Lakers tonight. So I think that showed a really like a lack of focus and concentration. And you saw that on the floor as well. But free throw line, like the Lakers have actually been a pretty good free throw shooting team this season. And despite LeBron and AD sometimes not shooting free throws great, but like Austin, in particular, recently has had several games where he's like 13 for 13. He just had a 16 for 16 free throw game. Like he has been in a groove offensively for the free throw line, and he just tonight, 6 for 8, 1 for 10 on threes. Like it was kind of everybody. Like it was a team wide epidemic in terms of missing free throws. So I think that, to me, we could also look at the turnovers and how high they were in the competitive portion of the game. We could also look at the offensive rebounding for Utah, the paint points for Utah, that run to open the third quarter. But to me, I look at the free throws and I'm like, that's something you can control. And if they go 25 for 30, 27 for 30, even like 23 for 30, that's anywhere between like 6 to 10 extra points that sways a run and momentum, and like all that stuff builds up for, the way that this game snowballed. So I think the free throw line was a huge thing tonight. Ultimately, to me, it was the defense that gave up 40 points in the third quarter. It really, looking at the first 3 quarters, 33 points allowed, 31 points allowed, 40 points allowed. They gave up 101 points through 3 quarters. 104, excuse me. 104 points in 3 quarters. That's far too many. Like the defense was Swiss cheese tonight. And that was just, that was it. So takeaway number 1 for me is going to be Luka's passing. And to me, like, it's just mind boggling. Like I've seen Luka Doncic play, right? Like I was watching intently during the 2022 conference finals run. I was watching intently during the 2024 finals run. I covered a playoff series with Luka and the Clippers, and like that was kind of his coming out party. Remember, he hits that game winning jumper. I think it was game 2 over Reggie Jackson. And so I've been monitoring and watching Luka, so I know what Luka could do. But seeing it's different when you're seeing it in person more consistently. You're like, typically, obviously, I'm watching the team that I'm covering. You're kind of observing it through that lens. So now seeing Luka on the Lakers and watching him through the Lakers lens, it is like, just from if you're a basketball junkie, if you love just basketball and watching and learning and just analyzing, like the Lakers have just gone to a different level in terms of the offense and just the capabilities, and also just like the way that Luka plays. And I know he went 16 points, 6 to 13 shooting, 1 for 5 from the free throw line, as I mentioned, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, had a steal and a block, also had 5 turnovers, had 5 fouls, and I believe, had a team worst plus minus. Lakers were outscored by 19 with him on the floor, but he's still on a minutes restriction. It's a new situation. I think it's much different actually for like a bigger piece to acclimate. He's not like he's a role player just coming in. Okay, I'm gonna jog to the 3-point line, spot up at the quarter, and then like play hard defense. It's like, no, the offense is being tailored around him. He's playing a lot of point guard, and tonight it was funny because after last post-game reaction, I mentioned his 1 turnover and how impressive that was for a guy playing his first game in 6 weeks with a new team, new offense. And he only turned the ball over 1 time. And I was like, he's probably going to have a game at some point in the future where he turns the ball over a lot. And like, that's okay, because more often than not, he's making the right play. And I think, tonight was obviously the higher turnover game, but it's like the pass he made to Austin where he's driving downhill, draws 2 guys, and then just flicks this behind the back pass up to Austin above the arc. It's like that is such a hard pass to make. It's a no look pass. It's a behind the back pass, and it's a pretty far distance. Like it's one thing maybe where you're around the elbow and a guy back cuts and you just hit them with like a quick behind the back pass. But like doing a behind the back pass as you're going the opposite way, your momentum is carrying you the opposite way. Like that was just one of the most ridiculous passes I have ever seen. And it really was kind of nonchalant. Like it just felt like another Luka pass. But like players of Austin's talked about it. Dalton talked about it tonight. Rui's talked about it. Like guys are now having to adjust like and realize that at any point I'm on the floor with Luka and he has the ball, I can get a pass from anywhere. It doesn't matter how improbable or unlikely or like ridiculous it seems for him to hit me. I need to have my hands ready. And like that's been, I think, one of the more exciting things. And we've seen, of course, these elements with LeBron and what he can do as a passer. But I think like having both of those guys out there, that's not even to mention Austin, who actually led the group in assists tonight with 11. I just think once this group has more reps together, goes through some practices, has 5 to 10 games under their belt. Like again, they played 2 games. They're both against the Jazz. As JJ said pregame, the Jazz are kind of a weird team to measure themselves against because they switch everything. They have a bunch of size in the front court. It's not like the typical team necessarily. So I like they're going to come out of the break. They're going to play Charlotte. They're going to play Portland. They're going to play Denver. Those will be some different types of defenses, different types of defenders, and that'll show us where the Lakers are at offensively. But I think the ceiling is clearly there. And with Luka and some of the turnovers, like there was one time there was just a simple pass that he threw to Austin, and Austin was cutting, and it was a turnover off Luka, but that was a timing thing. That was like a chemistry thing that you learn in terms of like players' tendencies. So he thought Austin was going to stay on the wing. Austin was going to cut. And that was just like, that's not really on either of them. That's just a basketball mistake in terms of like not playing with each other and not having those reps. So I say all this to say, like, I think Luka's passing and the downhill element, I think, has been really pivotal for the offense. You see, he had several nice finishes at the rim tonight, and he's just so strong that like when he's going like 5 miles per hour down downhill, but his pace is throwing everybody off. People don't know what to do. They're like, is he going to pass it? Is he going to pull up? Is he going to drive? Like he's moving at his own pace, and it's throwing the defense off. And then guys are swiping at it. But he's so strong that like with his 2 hands on the ball, guys aren't going to smack it out. Like there are some players that you expose the ball a little bit, it can be smacked out. Luka is not one of those guys. Like when he is getting downhill, he has such command over the ball that it's really just been, I think, an amazing, awesome thing to watch. And I think the Lakers are just scratching the surface in terms of what they can do offensively with him. So of course, there's a learning curve and there's going to be adjustments and just in terms of the rhythm with him and LeBron and like how they split that up and where guys are offensively. Like I think all that stuff is still a work in progress, clearly, but I think we've seen the potential with some of the passes he's been able to execute. We've seen the potential of like I think right now he's still in when you're in a new situation, especially as an athlete, like you really go out of your way to try to acclimate and make everyone else feel comfortable. And I think there's been an element of that. Like I thought Luka had it going early and the Lakers kind of went away from him, and it was like, no, like let Luka cook and like let him do his thing. And that's goes to what LeBron told him before the first Utah game, like don't fit in, fit out. And I think that's a process, right? Because human nature is you're in a new situation. You want to make a good first impression. You want to get to know everybody. And Luka is inherently not a selfish player, and he is a selfless, team first, pass first type guy. So I think that it's still a work in progress, and I think they will continue to tinker over the break in terms of reviewing film and reviewing the best way to run the offense. But overall, I've been encouraged through the first couple of games, And I think we're just scratching the surface in terms of what the Lakers can do with Luka out there running the show. And I think it's really just been fun to watch from a basketball fan perspective. Like putting everything else aside, it's very entertaining. It's a fun brand of basketball. And again, I think it needs some time. It needs a few more games before we really start to judge it. But in terms of the early returns, I think there's been a lot of positives. Takeaway number 2 for me is the Alex Len debut. And I came out here and I tried to keep it as real as possible with Alex Len and tell you guys, like, hey, this is my impression of Alex Len. I watched good 45 minutes of synergy film on both sides of the ball. I went through all his numbers. I went through all his box scores over the last few years. And like, this has just been basically the third string center on the Kings. And they've often opted to play small, like Trey Lyles at center over Alex Len. And like, I get what the Lakers are going for with like wanting a big body and wanting a physical, tough big man, and they didn't really have that guy, at least on the 15-man roster. But I was just like, I don't know if this guy is it. I don't know if he's got the requisite skill and ability anymore to do those things. I think he's slipped athletically as a rim protector with his mobility, with his finishing. And I just think like outside of like settings, I thought he set good screens tonight, but outside of that, I was like, I don't know if this guy's like a rotation level guy. And I think that's how it played out, to put it kindly. Like, it was a pretty rough debut. The final numbers were not as rough as the actual competitive portion of the game, because overall he ended up playing 22 minutes because Jackson Hayes gets injured. So he has to start in the second half, and they have to rely on him a lot more than anticipated. But 4 points, 2 for 5 shooting, 7 rebounds, 2 offensive, 2 assists, 1 block, 3 fouls, and the Lakers were outscored by 9 points in his 22 minutes. However, most of those stats were boosted in garbage time when he came back in for his third shift after the game was already decided. And his stats going into that point were 0 points, 3 rebounds, 1 offensive, no blocks, 2 fouls, and the Lakers were outscored by 19 points in his 14 minutes. And part of that was certainly skewed by that run to start the third. But a lot of that run was Utah getting downhill and scoring directly on Alex Len. So to be clear, I want to give him some grace, because this was a situation where I wasn't even sure if he was going to play today because of how short notice everything was. He didn't get to join the team until late last night. And he said he didn't know like we spoke to him after the game. He didn't know the offense. He didn't know any plays. Basically, JJ was trying to keep everything as basic as possible for him. So I do want to give him that grace and that acknowledgement. At the same time, he did not look far off from the player that he was in Sacramento, which is guys were able to target him, get downhill on him, finish over him. The rebounding was solid, but really a lot of it's like kind of him just pushing guys and like hoping that he pushes them away for the basket. And like sometimes you can pick up fouls that way. And sometimes it's almost like he's kind of preoccupied with that and not actually like, where's the ball going? And I thought there were sometimes he was trying to battle Kessler, but like the ball was still kind of in his vicinity. And if he wasn't focused as much on that, he could have gotten to get it. But anyway, like offensively, I said I think he's like slightly below average defensively and very much below average offensively. And I thought that, he comes in, he's actually been decent on floaters. He's been shooting like around 50, a little over 50% in that range, but throws up a wild floater first possession. Then I think tries to tip the ball back in. So that counts as like a missed field goal. And then he gets a dump off pass. And if that was Jackson Hayes, I mean, it's probably a lob if it's Jackson Hayes. But if that's Jackson Hayes is dunking that or getting fouled. Of course, if that was AD, he's dunking that or getting fouled. Even Christian Koloko had a nice, I forgot if it was a slip or a roll. He catches the ball in one motion, goes up and dunks. Alex Len catches the ball, gathers himself, tries to go up, and he's about to dunk it, and Walker Kessler smacks it out and blocks him. And so I want to give him some grace with the context of everything. At the same time, I kind of feel like this is who he is, and maybe he can play 10 to 20% better, but 10 to 20, 30% better, but even 30% better than how bad he was tonight. I still don't think that guy should probably be playing. So I don't think he was going to play 22 minutes tonight under normal circumstances. I think this was partly because Jackson got injured, and we'll see ultimately. So for those who don't know, Jackson got hit in the face by John Collins late in the first quarter. Then he ends up having to exit the game, go back to the locker room, and it doesn't return with a facial contusion. It doesn't seem to be too serious, but anytime you leave a game and don't return, like that, there's always that possibility of it being more serious. But with face injuries, typically at worst, it's like they gotta. I mean, of course, there's surgery and potentially, and like that's a factor in terms of like how long a player's out. But usually, it's just like wear a mask or just play through it. So that would be my assumption going into the All-Star break, and Jackson coming out of it either wearing a mask or just being fine. But I think Alex Len to me is like he's like a one shift player who maybe if he performs okay is like a two shift player. But I mean, I would even say for my low expectations, I thought he was even worse than that. And again, it could be the context of everything and new system thrown into the fire and whatnot. But I also think his job out there is pretty simple. It's like set screens, crash the offensive glass, finish dump off passes, and protect the rim and be a drop big. Like I feel like they kept it pretty simple for him, and he was struggling with like 3 or 4 of those 5 responsibilities. So I just kind of think it is what it is. In a perfect world, I think LA could have, or I think LA would have given him a 10-day contract, clearly because Indiana was willing to sign him for the rest of the season. That was not going to be an option. Like he was not going to take a 10-day with LA and bypass guaranteed money with Indiana. So for the Lakers to get him, they had to sign him for the rest of the season. But I think if it had been under better circumstances and they were able to give him a 10-day contract, I would assume they would not keep him after this 10-day contract. It's just, they've signed him for the rest of the season. Now, technically, LA can still waive one more player. So theoretically, they could waive Len, but I don't think they're going to do that. I think it's going to be more likely either if a certain caliber of buyout center becomes available, they will waive someone else for that type of center. Or if that player doesn't become available, then they consider either converting one of the 3 two-way guys. I would assume it would be between Koloko or Goodwin, but one of those two two-way guys. I think Trey Jemison is more likely to stay just as a two-way guy to potentially be the other addition that they make to like the official roster. Of course, Goodwin's been playing well, and I think I'd probably peg him as like the more likely guy and the guy I'd probably give it to. But I still like Koloko. I think really like Koloko didn't even play that well, but he was better than Len tonight. Like he ended up taking some of Len's minutes until garbage time. So we'll see. But I think, I don't want to say it was a mistake because I think the Lakers had good intentions behind it. At the same time, I don't know how you could watch Alex Len film and look at the way his last 3 seasons have gone and think that like that was the answer. So I think he'll play better in the future, but I don't think he should be playing more than like 8 to 12 minutes a night. And even then, some nights is probably like the wrong thing. And I think the rim protection was the thing that was the most concerning to me of like, again, you getting traded to a new team doesn't affect how you protect the rim. And the fact that like, I mean, he got dunked on by Lauri Markkanen and several of their guards just took it at him and scored on him. And that's the thing that to me is like probably the most concerning, because if he's out there, he needs to be rebounding, which he did better in the garbage time shift, but that, I mean, that doesn't really matter what you do in garbage time. Like it does, but really like they needed it the first 14 minutes. And then, the rim protection. And I don't think he did really a good job in I think he did a bad job in rim protection, and I think he did an okay job with the rebounding. And I think he did a good job with the screening, but you could find guys who could screen well. Like Trey Jemison could screen well. If the justification for playing a guy is he's a good screener and like that's all you could say, that's a bit concerning. So that was my Alex Len scouting report. And then third and final takeaway before we get into the Q&A here is Lakers at the All-Star break. So I kind of touched on this in my overarching takeaway in terms of like how they've been playing recently, but now I want to look ahead. So we'll see what happens with Jackson. JJ said that DFS and Gabe are not these are not long-term injuries. It was just more of a maintenance thing. It's stuff that they've been dealing with, that they wanted to give them essentially a rest game and give them an extended break going into the All-Star break. But so you got JJ and Luka both getting settled, Dalton resettling, all on like a personal level for those guys. But it sounds like they're not going to practice Monday, but probably Tuesday before the Charlotte game on Wednesday. And they got that back-to-back Wednesday and Thursday. And I think this is a group that should win the Charlotte game. Portland's been playing well, and that's a tough back-to-back with how they've been playing. And just LA and Portland has always been tougher games for the Lakers. More recently, they've dominated Portland, but just historically, post-millennium, it's always a tough place to play. Portland is not like LA, but they should win those two, and then they go to Denver, and that's a big game on that following Saturday. But I think, again, you can make a case for this group being as high as number 4 in the league. I'd probably peg them as like number 6 right now, but that's a pretty good place to be. And really, I only see them going higher than lower as Luka gets back to being himself. Like his 14-point performance was tied for the lowest scoring performance of the past 4 years. That first game against Utah, then he had 16 tonight. He's been on a minutes restriction. JJ's made it clear that Luka is like fuming about being on a minutes restriction. He wants to play as much as possible, but both games ended up being blowouts. So he ended up, it's a 30-minute minutes restriction, but within both games, Lakers blow out the Jazz. So they rest him, they get blown out. So they pull him early. And in neither game, he didn't play in the fourth in either game because there was no reason to. But moving forward, I think like the Lakers are again, just figuring out the offensive end. Defensively, I do think they have an identity, and I think Luka fits into that identity. I think we've seen him already be a bit disruptive on the back line with his help defense. Of course, on the ball, he can be targeted or blown by, and that's something that the Lakers are going to have to figure out, and just in terms of like how they're going to support him and how they're going to fit that into their scheme. But we know the potential of this team. I think it's really high. I think, again, we might even be underselling it. I really think this group has a chance to make a conference finals and potentially go further depending on health and how they continue to gel and how the rest of the season goes. Remember, they got that brutal stretch from late February to late March where we will really learn a lot about this group. But I just wanted to quickly touch on like, I know that there's a lot of excitement and a lot of disappointment in a lot of excitement in general, but also some disappointment in how tonight went. But I think things are trending in the right direction. I think everyone should just keep the perspective of winning 12 to 15 and this grouping 12 games above 500. They were just 13 games above 500. That was something that never happened in the Darvin Ham era. They've never been in this spot in the Darvin Ham era. You have to go back to the Frank Vogel era. In really the second Frank Vogel season, 2020, 2021. So like the Lakers are playing their best basketball. Arguably, I wouldn't say since the 2020, 2021 season, I would say. And that's very encouraging. So I just wanted to offer that reminder of like, I think this group is they added a huge piece, and that takes time to fit him in and figure out both sides of the ball around him. Like, again, this isn't just like throwing in a role player where it's a much easier process. It's more on like that guy to adjust. Whereas I think now it's kind of a two-way street between Luka adjusting and the Lakers adjusting. So that's all I wanted to say on like long term, I'm very bullish on the Lakers. I think this team is really, really good. I do wonder if they could have maybe used that 15th roster spot in a better way, but I don't think that's the difference between them winning a championship or not. I think it's going to have to be Jackson playing at a certain level and the small ball groups playing at a certain level. And if those two things happen, then I think they at least have a shot. I'm not saying they're the favorites. I'm not even saying they're like tier one contender. I don't, they're clearly not the favorites. And I don't think they're quite at a tier one level contender yet, but I think they have the potential to get there. So with all that said, let's get into the Q&A. See, we got one from Samir Dude. Thank you for the super chat. Jovan, do you think tonight was more just the guys having an off night because we were missing key guys, or did the loss expose some weaknesses? I think it's more the former than the latter. However, I do think there are two long-term concerns with this group and that were partly exposed tonight that I will be interested to see, like the Denver matchup, for example. I think the two biggest weaknesses with this Laker group right now, in my opinion, are rim protection and defensive rebounding. And it's largely because of trading away Anthony Davis. And even to an extent, when AD was there, I mean, how many times did they have double-digit offensive rebounds allowed to an opponent, or like 15, 20 plus second chance points allowed? Or how many times when AD was off the floor or whatever, so I think just when it comes down to it, the combination of Jackson, who's been better as a rim protector, but he's just not ultimate. Like, I think he is becoming an above average rim protector, and even on some nights has been a good rim protector. But I think in general, he's not a great rim protector. He's not like a dominant rim protector. And I wouldn't even put him on like the good class, because I still think there's far too many possessions where he reaches his arms out, he fouls guys, and he also is so slight that absorbing contact in air, guys can go into Jackson's chest and finish over him. So again, I think him becoming even an above average rim protector is like a positive development for sure. But I don't think like he's like a championship. I mean, he's a vet minimum player, and I think he's outplayed that contract. But it's not like he's like a $20 million player or even a $10 million player necessarily. So if you look at like typically contenders and championship teams, it's like all-star level centers, or they at least, like Golden State's an exception, but for part of that, they had Steph, Clay, KD, and Draymond, and then also they were able to downside. Like a lot of times in big games, they would go Draymond at the 5. Not the full game, but in crunch time. And that brings me to the second part of this, which is like, I think the Lakers ceiling, in my opinion, might just come down to how well their small ball lineups can protect the rim and can protect the defensive glass. And they've done a solid job, especially against the Clippers and the Knicks in both of those games. And even, I think, some of the Boston game against Golden State. So they've done a solid job so far. But there will be bigger tests. Like, how does that look against Jokic? Can they dictate terms against Denver? Or does Jokic just overpower them? And we've seen typically when they play Denver, when they're switching, and an Austin or even Cam, even Vando has been switched on to Jokic, he will just back them down and just loft in that little 6-footer that he's so lethal with. So I think LA, like figuring that out within small ball lineups. But I think those are really the two only things, because offensively, like one kind of funny thing with tonight was they actually hit 23s, which ties their season high. So like they had from that perspective, like there was a lot of good, and I know some of that was garbage time, but like there was some good shot generation and shot making tonight for LA. So I think playmaking, nice bubble there. Playmaking, with Luka, LeBron, and Austin, they're going to be elite. Shot making, Luka, LeBron, Austin, Rui, even DFS and Gabe as catch and shoot guys, Jackson as a rim runner, finisher, they're going to be great within that. Defensively, they've showed, I think they have the requisite talent in terms of Gabe, DFS, Vando, LeBron when he's locked in, Rui and AR in certain matchups. Even Luka is like a helper, backline guy. And then Jackson, again, has improved defensively. So I think there is a certain level like they can get to defensively that we've seen in recent games is pretty high. But I think for me, it comes down to I have concerns when teams can get downhill on them and get to the rim. Is it a layup line or are they getting to the free throw line a lot? And the defensive rebounding and boxing out, the bigger front lines, the teams with good offensive rebounders, like how does that go? So I think my two biggest concerns with this group are again, rim protection and defensive rebounding. I think tonight encapsulated a lot of that. Again, to kind of utter the sentence, like I think earlier this season, it was like when AD's off the floor, there's a lot of concern with both of those things. Now we're like, well, when Jackson's off the floor, now we're really concerned about the rim protection and the rebounding. And that's a credit to Jackson and his improvement throughout the season. But that's also a state of like the rest of the roster. And I don't think Alex Len came in and like improved that. So I still think it's going to have to be Jackson continuing to get better and grow as a player. And then the small ball lineups continue to get reps together, get more experience, more continuity. And then those lineups, them really, I think, having to do a lot of the work early. And it's like, the best way to protect the rim is to not let people get to the rim, right? And you got to be careful with that because you don't want to, because sometimes like last year's Lakers, they would overemphasize that and then just give up wide open threes. And you can't do that, right? So it is a fine line in a delicate balance there. But I think my two biggest things continue to just be rim protection and defensive rebounding. And I don't think, to quote AD last season, there's no cavalry coming. So I don't think they're necessarily getting better. Like, I don't know if they're going to find a player that's going to like solve that. So I think it's going to have to be internal growth and just them being like so awesome offensively and just good enough in those areas that like it doesn't really matter. Avant Traders, thank you for the super chat. Luka looked really slow on closeouts, even on offense. He seems far from 100%. Question is, will he be able to get 100% this season, or will he need a full offseason? I agree. Now, closeouts have been an issue for him this season. I mentioned it. I forget what show it was, but I did mention he leads the league in blow by rate, and what that essentially means is like the percentage that he is blown by on the perimeter or a guy drives by him. So that's obviously not like a great thing. So I think in general, his closeouts could be better. I don't even think that's necessarily like conditioning plays a part in that, of course, but I think that's more of just like a more of like some of his defensive limitations. And I don't know, like, so I'm going to make the comparison with like Jokic, right? So he's gotten better as a rim protector, but he's never going to have a 40-inch vertical. So for as good as Jokic can be as a rim protector, and a lot of the lineup data and defensive data has shown that he has become much better defensively. And a guy like Steph too, right? Like Steph earlier in his career was a glaring target. And even now there are some times where teams will target him, but Steph bulked up. He got better defensively. He became more aggressive. He learned how to, generate steals and apply ball pressure better. And Jokic, I think, has improved as a rim protector, but there's still limitations there, right? Steph Curry will always be 6'3", and he'll never be like the biggest guy. And he's never going to have the Marcus Smart type of body or frame or whatever. Jokic might be 6'11", 7 foot, whatever. He's never going to jump out of the gym and have a 40-inch vertical and a 9'9" Mark Williams standing reach. And like, there's certain physical limitations there. So I think with Luka, that there are some of those foot speed, keeping guys, mirroring guys' footwork and ball handling on the perimeter. Like, I think that will kind of always be a limitation for him. But he has improved as a helper. He has improved as a roamer. He has improved in terms of anticipation and playing passing lanes and whatnot. So I think this is not his defensive ceiling. He can certainly be better defensively. Part of it is the calf. Like, I don't think we can overlook the calf strain. He's been on a minutes restriction. He had not played basketball in 6 weeks. I do think he deserves some grace for it. And also, I frankly, like, I think it's harder probably for a guy like him. This is where, if you want to throw in some of the conditioning stuff, like, I think it's harder for a guy like him probably to miss 6 weeks and come back than a guy like LeBron. Like, LeBron keeps himself at a certain shape and physical form. And I think it's probably easier for him. So I'm not letting him off the hook with some of that stuff, but I think that between the calf strain and some of the conditioning stuff, like, that plays a part. But ultimately, I think that there are just some physical limitations with like what he can do defensively. That said, I think he's improved in other ways, and I think we've seen a little bit of that. But we will continue to see more as he can play more, as he gets into a better rhythm, as he gets his legs and his wind back a little bit more. And I don't think this is going to be his version defensively the rest of the way. Offensively, again, same thing. I think conditioning, returning from injury, getting into a flow with the team. There's a lot of things that could happen offensively for him to play better. So one thing I will say is, like, from covering teams now for 7 years, one thing that you hear coaches and players constantly say is, like, the second the first day of training camp starts, you are never 100% the rest of the way. So to that part of the question, I would say he's never going to be 100% because I don't think LeBron's going to be 100%. I don't think Austin's going to be 100%. Like, the second that ball is thrown up at the first day of training camp, you are never 100%. You are constantly, like, these guys are constantly dealing with stuff. And a lot of times it's stuff we don't even know about, or it's stuff that's not public and they just don't want people to know about. Like, you only really find out about it if it's like a notable injury that keeps them out of games. But if, you could tweak your knee and you could just play through that, and it's not on the injury report, and no one knows. And it's like, well, why is player X, like, they're not running as hard? They're not doing, like, there's all these things that are going on that we don't always know about, or we can't report on or share or whatever. And sometimes that's stuff that's affecting players. So I think, not to get like too technical on it, but I think he can get close to 100%. And I don't think he needs a full off season. So I hope that makes you feel better. But yes, there will be defense limitations. Like, that's just part of Luka and his game. But he is so great offensively that you take the offense defense trade off. And I think for the Lakers, it's just going to be figuring out what are the best lineups and configurations to make sure that some of those limitations aren't costing them as much as they can be. Rich, thank you for the super chat. What up, Jovan? Why isn't LeBron doing media? So good job here. I didn't even mention it yet. LeBron did not do media tonight or after either Utah game. So it's 2 straight games of no media. And he didn't play in the game Saturday against the Pacers. So it's actually 3 straight games of no media. Without divulging too much, like, my understanding, he's about to go to All-Star. He's about to do media there. So I think he just kind of wanted the night off at a break, but he has not spoken after both Luka games, which is, I don't want to make too much of it. I don't even want to make anything of it. I just, it would be nice to hear what was it like to play with Luka, like 2-man game and some of the passing and like the offense and all that stuff. So it was one thing. LeBron I've said this before, LeBron rarely takes the night off. So first time he did it after the blowout, it's like, okay, whatever. The night's more about Luka. It's Luka's first game. It's his kind of homecoming, welcome performance, his debut. But tonight, it was a blowout loss. But would have been nice to hear from him going into the All-Star break. So I don't have much more of an answer than that, but it was unfortunate, yeah. Samir Dude, again, thank you for the super chat. Is JJ going to let Luka start running the offense much more once he gets healthy? I think he needs to get much more involved. I would say yes and yes. I think he's been running the offense a bit. I'm going to pull up the usage from tonight's game. Now, I am interested because I think he had a 29% usage in the first game. I wonder what it was tonight, how much higher or lower it was. Where's this? Okay. Pulling up the box score here. And usage. His usage tonight was 34.5%, which was, for perspective, LeBron was 21.2%, and Austin was 20.2%. So he actually had, I'm just double checking that in a different tab. Yeah, he actually had like, his usage went up by 5% this game, and both Austin's went up. I think he was 17% in the first game, so he went up to 20. And then LeBron went down a lot. LeBron was 34% in the first game. He was at, whatever, 20 tonight. So Luka actually had the ball a lot more tonight, and I thought it looked good for the most part. Of course, there were some turnovers of a couple times he forced a couple passes, a couple times I think there was miscommunication on what a teammate was going to do, misunderstanding, whatever. But yes, I think he's going to be much more involved in the offense, and I think that's a good thing. So I do expect that to be a post All-Star break adjustment. And next one from Kane Carter. Thank you for the super chat. Can getting Bronny hurt your... Oh, okay. Bronny, not Bronny James, but Bronny as in bigger, bulkier, stronger, more muscle. Can getting Bronny hurt your shot like with AD and Giannis? Certainly. Yeah. And I mean, with the exception, I guess, of Steph, although I think you could probably argue like he hasn't been... Well, I don't know if... I mean, Steph's like an alien with the shooting, so I don't... But I think a guy like Clay, I mean, part of it was also his injuries, but I feel like Clay has gotten a little bigger, and he hasn't been the same level of shooter. Still an elite shooter, still arguably the second best shooter of all time, but like more recently, post-injury, it feels like he's transitioned more to being like... He was always like a 2 who could slide up to play 3, and then now he's been more of like a 3 who could slide up to play 4, and he's just, I feel like, a little bulkier. But in general, yes, I think it affects your shot mechanics. And for like, if you just think about, I mean, I've never really bulked or been bulky, but if you just think about like carrying more muscle and carrying more weight, and just like yes, you're stronger, but just like doing simple, like there's kind of the memes or the jokes or whatever about like, the guys who are like too buff to like lift their arms above their head. Like that's kind of the same logic there of if you are too brawny. I keep thinking of Bronny James, so I'm going to change it to like bulky. If you're too bulky or too muscular, then it's going to affect your shot mechanics. So I think for guys that, and that is a real, like, that's not just me speculating. That is a real thing when guys are bulking up. Like there is an element of like if it's 5-10 pounds, it's probably not going to make that much of a difference. But if guys are like a Giannis bulked up a lot, an AD bulked up a lot, those are two really good examples. I think like an AD almost had like 2 bulks, because if you look at when he was like in high school in Kentucky compared to deeper into his career in New Orleans. And then when you look at like his first Lakers season to a couple seasons later, once he started playing full-time center, there was a couple of bulking phases for AD, and it affects your shot. Like his shot, good shooting season, the championship season, but like you go back and watch some of the New Orleans highlights, like AD's hitting pull-up jumpers, like just like he looks like Kevin Durant out there, honestly. So I think it does affect your shot mechanics a lot. Diving into the chat, I'm going to go about 10 more minutes here. I'm going to be getting up and doing Alan Sliwa show in the morning for those who tune in to that. And I will be potentially, I have a vlog coming. I have first 2 Luka games. This bubble with the thumbs up. I got to stop doing that. First 2 Luka games, do this pointer now. And then just basically recapping this last few days of what it was like to cover Luka and his first couple games with the Lakers. So I have that vlog coming, and then I'm doing an episode. I'm leaning more toward Friday of like a leading into the All-Star break for the Lakers. Paul Parnello, I think we are missing AD and Max now. Why did we make this trade? I don't disagree with the first part in terms of LA missing AD and Max. I think they specifically miss Max. I think if we were ranking the players to keep, like you had to trade AD for Luka. There was no, you weren't gonna you were gonna combine Rui, Gabe, and Vando to get Luka. So if you had to do AD and he was the pillar of the deal, outside of LeBron and Austin, like I would rather have kept Max than anybody else. Dorian, Vando, Gabe, Rui, Dalton, whoever, like Max to me what was more valuable than all those guys. But I mean, you had to do it. Like it's, I get, they just lost to the Jazz. People are upset. It was a disappointing, disheartening loss, but Luka Doncic is a better player than Anthony Davis. Also, I will throw in AD's injured. Like AD might miss a month here. So the alternative was potentially having AD and Max and AD being out now for like another month and LA being in the same predicament of like, okay, Jackson's starting now. And AD apparently is considering surgery that would likely end his season. So you'd still have Max, but like it basically the trade right now is if we're putting like on court, comparison, it's basically Max for Luka. And I think I would take the Luka side. And look, I was the guy caping for Max all off season and saying he should start, saying he should have a big role, saying he's going to be a bargain. I think all that stuff played out, but I'm not crazy enough to pick Max over Luka. So I hear you. Let's give it a bigger sample size. Let's see. Like, look, Max is playing great. He's playing even better than he did in LA. He's averaging 17 points a game in Dallas over the 5 games he's played. Like Max has been awesome. And I got asked the question on here where someone asked, like, what do you think Max's role is going to be? And I said, I think he's probably going to start as a bench player and then just play his way into being like a 30+ minute a night guy for them. Cause I just think he's going to outplay their whole perimeter group, outside of Kyrie and Clay. I think will always have a certain role. And that's kind of happening right now. Like he's I mean, they traded Grimes, but like, he's ahead of Dinwiddie and some of those guys already. So like Max is just really good. He's a really good 3-and-D player. I see we got some more super chats here from Eeg. Oh, wait, I missed one. 4 from Eeg. Thank you, Eeg. Eeg, Jovan, missed you. I only got $1 to $5 under my pillow from the Tooth Fairy. Rob got 50 bands from Nico Harrison. What a gift that was. Rant coming. Continue. All right, we got a rant here from Eeg. Next one. I was ready to embark on a Rob apology tour tonight, completely aside. Don't care if we lost by 70. Rim protection and boards will be the overwhelming reason this team may fall short. Those are both my concerns. Hayes and Len is so beyond unserious. Please help me understand though. Luka or no Luka, we needed a center. How do we not get Claxton? How are we last second scrambling for a C for it to fall through? Then he says, so many moves around the margin in this tenure have failed. I just don't trust Rob to build out a team properly as he can't even acquire a dire need. P.S. Still so hyped / shocked. We got Luka. Insane. Quite the rant there from Eeg. I appreciate the multiple super chats there. And I hear you. I certainly agree to an extent. I mean, I definitely agree. The rebounding and the defensive, or the defensive rebounding and the rim protection are my 2 biggest concerns with this group. I agree with that. I think Jackson has been better, but I think actually when I was just talking about Jackson, I only touched on the rim protection. He's still not a good defensive rebounder. So that's the other part of the Jackson thing is like he's become an above average rim protector in my opinion, but he's still a below average. Some nights he's below average, some nights he's bad in terms of his defensive rebounding. And I think he's gotten better with boxing out and being more physical in general, but I still don't think he makes like a significant impact on the glass. In that sense, he's a good offensive rebounder, but defensively. So I'm with you. And Len, as I said, like I was not my first choice. I think there were better guys available. I might've been a little bit more patient. And honestly, tonight, because tonight was an example, like for those who were like, well, the Lakers needed a center, go get the best center, whatever. Tonight, what was kind of to that point of, okay, well, Jackson goes down. DFS is also out. They needed a center tonight. But I would flip the question and ask you this: like, would Christian Koloko and Trey Jemison playing tonight have been that much worse, if worse at all, compared to Alex Len? Like I thought Christian Koloko had a better couple shifts than Alex Len when he played. But like if Trey Jemison got those minutes, or they were split between Koloko and Jemison, I don't think we see much of a drop off. If not like them basically playing the same level, or maybe even a little better. So that's where like I don't think the Len thing moves me. And in terms of Claxton, the price was high. I think they want, like, it probably would have required a similar price in terms of Dalton first swap, something like that in that range. And then the other thing, and I think this was the complicating factor with this, that just kind of depends how you view it. Like the salary matching was going to be difficult because you're going to have to put Rui and Gabe in the deal. And Brooklyn didn't really want to take on longer term salary in terms of beyond this summer. And so maybe you would have had to throw in a third team, and then maybe you're rerouting one of those guys, but then you also have to give that team an asset. Teams aren't just taking on players without getting an asset in return. The Lakers had limited assets to give out. So I think that complicated that. I think for the right price, I think Claxton would have been available. I think, like, if you look at it from like getting Mark Williams and just giving up Dalton, who I feel like I do the thumbs up all the time. I don't know why it's doing this. For those who are listening, it keeps through like a thumbs up bubble. I'm going to keep my thumb outside of the frame. But you giving up Dalton and Cam and getting Mark Williams, you're taking the ninth man out of your rotation, ninth or 10th, and adding a starter, and then properly slotting Jackson. For Claxton, yes, he's a better player than Mark Williams. I'd rather have Claxton, of course, than Mark Williams. However, that was going to require Rui and Gabe. And just think about like what this team would look like in that, and potentially Dalton, but let's just say for argument's sake, they keep Dalton and they just give up the same package in terms of draft capital. Okay, so now you're starting Claxton, LeBron, DFS, Austin, Luka. Love that starting lineup. Love that. Love that starting lineup. You're upgrading Jackson to Claxton and Rui to DFS, in my opinion, an upgrade. But now your bench is Vando and Dalton and Shake Milton. Maybe you convert Jordan Goodwin. Although, like at that time, you didn't know Jordan Goodwin was going to be this. He wasn't yet a two-way guy. It gets pretty grim. So, like Cam Reddish is the eighth man. Like I don't know. So I would say that the concern to that scenario is like LA really wanted to find a deal where they did not have to give up rotation, their top 8. They, like Rob and JJ talked about it, they wanted to keep all those guys unless it was like such a game changer that it was worth giving them up. But like in those two, let's just again kind of talk through it for a second. You already gave up 2 starters and lost a rotation player in the Luka trade. Then you do that again for Claxton. Now you've traded 4 players for 2. And yes, I think you're clearly getting the best player. Like the Luka trade, of course, and operates in sort of its own stratosphere, but you are doing 2 separate trades where you're basically emptying the cupboard asset wise, and you're losing 2 rotation players. You're gaining 2, losing 4 for your top 8. And all of a sudden, I just think you have like no depth. Like you basically have a top 6, and 2 of those top 6 cannot shoot in Claxton and Vando. And then it gets really grim after that. You get to Shake Milton. I like Jordan Goodwin, but I don't love him as like a 7th man. I think that's a little bit too much for him. And then, I guess, so Jackson's a 7th man. I apologies to Jackson. It would be Vando and Jackson as your 6th and 7th men. And then you got to Jordan Goodwin and Shake Milton and Cam Reddish. And again, I guess depends if Dalton's there or not. So Nick Claxton, I I still like as a potential target this summer, and you could still go after it this summer. Rui will be expiring. Gabe will be expiring. That maybe changes it. As for the last part, I think that the fair criticism here is, I think, and from talking to more people outside the situation now, I think they should have done, given Mark Williams' injury history, like just taking it at face value, put aside the physical, put aside long-term concerns. This is a guy who's played in 40% of his games in 3 seasons. So if you're acquiring that guy, you do need to have an insurance policy. And Jackson has been playing well, but you have to also factor in, okay, well, if Mark Williams gets injured, now we are promoting Jackson to the starting spot, and then we have nothing behind him. So I think the smart move, once LA made the determination that Mark Williams was the guy and that they were going to go after him, and they negotiated for 36 hours, I think it was really important to follow that up with getting another center. And maybe they thought that they could get one on the buyout market or in free agency. But like the difference between a Day'Ron Sharpe and Alex Len is very significant. And I would feel much different about this team. I mean, I think Sharpe would push Hayes for the starting spot. But even if he was coming off the bench, I think that's a much better player, a much more impactful player than Alex Len, even as, basically a minimum player up to this point, because of his contract. So, I think the smart move would have been following up the Mark Williams trade with another big. And then even if the trade gets nixed because of the physical, you have Day'Ron Sharpe in, or you have a different big man in, vet minimum or a cheap big man. And now you at least move forward with Jackson plus that big. I think that would have been the smarter move. So I hear you. I think it's fair to criticize. Like I don't understand why they have not prioritized the center position, because you could even go back to AD playing center. There's the whole conversation about him not wanting to play center and them not honoring that. But also it's like AD he's been healthy the last couple seasons, but before the last couple of years, AD had an injury history. And then when AD would miss time, it would be Dwight Howard on his last legs, or Damian Jones, or DeAndre Jordan on his last legs, even though he's continued to play somehow. And like it's just, Thomas Bryant, and it's just not been it. So I think they've needed to prioritize this position for years. They haven't done it. And I think now that the Mark Williams trade fell through, you're starting to see it potentially affect their ability to contend this season. And I think regardless of what happens this season, even if they won the championship, I don't think you move forward with Jackson Hayes as your starting center. I think you still have to go out and get a center if you're the Lakers. Next super chat from Oi De Boy. Stop crying, Eag. Hard to fill roster with trade deadline. I mean, I think Eag brings up good points. And I think, again, it didn't have to be big moves. I think there could have been a smaller move for another center. Claxton, I just laid out, and I laid it out previously before the Mark Williams trade, like why Claxton was kind of tough. He's making $27 million. So he was just in a salary. Anything really above like the low 20s was hard for LA to match. They could have gotten into that. I really said like anything above 30 was almost impossible for them to match realistically. But even a guy in the high 20s, it was just like you had to do Rui and Gabe. And I think LA was hesitant to give up that much of their rotation. And also Brooklyn had a really high price for Nick Claxton. I think they ideally wanted like 2 first-round picks or that equivalent. So it was just going to be a lot for them to give up for him. But I don't want you guys fighting in the chat. It's all love here. It's all the late night gang. Eag, another one. Thank you for the super chat. We got Luka with multiple days left. How many trades have gotten revoked over the last 20 years because of physicals? Did they swindle us? Did we try and swindle them? The Mark Williams situation is mind-boggling and extremely costly. Thank you. Off the top of my head, I think there's been 2 that have been revoked. And actually there was one, I believe was it the Caleb Martin or Cody Martin one? They amended it actually because of the physical. There was the Tyson Chandler one in 2009 between New Orleans and OKC, where that would have been a crazy what if, because it would have been Tyson Chandler in his prime with KD, Russ, and Harden and Ibaka. Like, think about that lineup. Tyson Chandler at the 5, Serge Ibaka at the 4, KD at the 3, Harden at the 2, well, technically Thabo Cephalosha, but really Harden at the 2 closing, and Russ at the 1. Like, that would have been, I think they potentially win the championship in 2011 when they make the finals against the Heat, and that has like insane ripple effects, that rescinded trade. So I don't think this one will have those that type of ripple effect, but who knows? We'll see. It's not many. I think there was one more Donatas Montiunas from Houston. I think in 2015 there was a rescindment of the trade because of a physical, but like that's like 2 trades in the past 16 years off the top of my head. And then another one where there was an amendment to the price. I don't think they swindled him in conversations with other people. I think league wide, like, they were not surprised Mark Williams did not pass his physical, and not that people knew, oh, he has this secret stuff. They were just like, this dude has been injured for 60% of his games. He's had 4 like major injuries since being in the NBA. Like, he's probably not going to have the best physical. So I don't think they tried to swindle. I think they viewed it as an opportunity to get off of him. And I think there was some concern about how he will age long term and like his ability to stay healthy. And they were also simultaneously high on Austin. And as I said at the time, and I think other people have made a similar point, like, it probably was a little high of a price for Mark Williams. I think the Lakers felt like they were okay overpaying to get Luka, a young center, a center of the future, and to raise the ceiling of this season's team and future teams. But I think in a vacuum, like, it was probably a bit of an overpay. And so I think Charlotte, it was like a combination of like, okay, we have this injury prone center. We're getting the guy we considered taking as high as number 6 of the draft. And we're getting this like insane package of a first and a swap and this and that, like a second. We're going to take it. So I think it was a confluence of all these factors that played into it. I don't think the Lakers tried to swindle them either necessarily. I just think they viewed it as like, Luka wants a vertical lob threat. We want to make a good impression with Luka. He just got here. Let's go get him what he wants. He still has to sign that extension or re-sign at some point. And we like Mark Williams. We think he could grow with Luka. So I think it was as simple as that. Okay, I will go 5 more minutes. C2 Cents says Sean Elliott was rescinded over his kidney. That's a good one. That was back in the 90s. And that one actually had a crazy, because I believe Robert Horry was in that deal, and he would have been going to Detroit. Dude, what's up with this bubble? Karanvir Gill, this was an outlier game. I largely agree with you. Like, the Lakers have been playing much better. Do you guys see the bubble? Am I crazy? Am I like hallucinating here? Or do you guys see the bubble in the chat as well? Like, when I do a thumbs up, it does a bubble. All right. Peace in the chat, everybody. Peace and love in the chat. Catching up here. L.A. Thank you for the super. I'm so used to saying super chat. Thank you for the chat. Like Severance, I love all chats equally. Jovan, does every NBA reporter live in Mid-City? The Cambros said they do on their pod, and 2 ESPN NBA reporters live next to my friend in Mid-City, but they haven't said it publicly, so I won't out them. I know one of the ones, actually no, 2 that live there as well, so it might be the same 2 that you are referencing. Not like, so I've lived in Mid-City, and apologies for those who don't know LA geography, but I'll give you. So coming out of school, actually moved home for 10 months and commuted from Agora Hills to Playa Vista when I was working at Fox Sports. That was a brutal commute. That was like hour and a half on the way there, 2 to 2.5 hours on the way back. Just a really tough commute. Uh, that's like, I think that's what I started becoming just obsessed with podcasts. And like, I'd go through like 4 to 6 podcasts a day easily. But then I lived in West Hollywood for a year, which was a wild year with me and a couple buddies of just, yeah, like early 20s West Hollywood. And then moved to Culver City, was there in a house with some friends for 5 years, and then moved in during COVID with my then girlfriend, eventually fiance and wife. And then we've lived in Mid City for probably almost 5 years, 4.5 years. And we lived in 2 different places there. So I like that area a lot. It's pretty central. So for me, the biggest thing is like, I got to split my time between going to downtown at crypto.com arena. And then I also got to go down to El Segundo for Lakers practice facility. So for me, it's like a 25, 30 minute drive to the arena and like a 35 minute drive to the practice facility. So like outside of maybe Culver City, where I previously lived, it's about a midway point kind of. So for me, it's more like the central location of still being in LA, because some people live in like the Valley, some people live in South Bay. A lot of NBA and Lakers people live in South Bay, which is really close to the facility, but then it's more of a mission to get down to downtown. So I picked Mid City for both liking the area and also how central and close it is to both the practice facility and downtown. But I'm probably going to be moving at some point this year, I would guess, and I'm going to assume I'm going to move in probably the north direction, and then it's going to make game will probably be similar, but getting to the practice facility is going to be tough. See, we got one super chat from Jazz_Sing. Thank you for the super chat. Not mad with this loss. Lakers were due a loss. Just wished it wasn't to the Jazz and in this way. I just hope the Lakers don't return back to their old ways. I also think there's an element here of like, think about when you were a kid and you had winter break coming up, and it was like that last day. I know for me all the time, and even not even when I was a kid, when I was in college, when I had winter break going up, it was like that last day of whatever your day of classes is. You're kind of checked out mentally, and of course summer, it's like a different level, and this isn't. I don't think this was quite that, but like that winter break, you're sort of just like, okay, let me get through the day. The second I'm done with the day, I have like 2.5 weeks off. It's going to be Christmas. I'm going to see my friends. I'm going to see my family. It's going to be New Year's, like all that stuff. You're looking forward to it. So I think for the Lakers, there was like, again, I can't understate like missing 3 of your top 8 guys, especially for this group who needs those like Gabe is point of attack 3-point shooting. I keep saying Vando. DFS is perimeter defense, switchability, certain level of toughness, boxes out well and hits threes. Jackson is obviously the screening, rim running, offensive rebounding, and has been better defensively lately. So like those were all 3 important pieces to this group that you take them out. Now all of a sudden you're relying on Alex Len. Shake was in there a bit. I think, Dalton first game back, and I thought he got picked on a bit, like scored 10 points, 17 minutes, looked like Dalton offensively, but also looked like Dalton defensively. So I think that was a big thing. But then you just beat the Jazz by 20. They have a certain level of pride. They're playing at home. You're kind of overlooking them, and you're also looking toward the All-Star break. So I think all that stuff, again, to say a confluence of things, I think went into this loss. So I wouldn't overreact. Oi the boy, or Ui the boy. I got to figure out how to say that one. Thank you for the super chat. In my opinion, committing big long-term money to the wrong center is how teams lower their ceiling. Lakers front office is too wary of that, and they undervalue the position. I would agree with that. I would also push back, and that's where like potentially Mark Williams would have been the wrong center. I would also say though that you could have it work the opposite way, where you undervalue the position too much. And maybe you are saying that, so I'm not saying you're not. But like I think you're more psychoanalyzing the decision making. And I agree with you. I just think that we've seen they have been cautious about, especially because AD's been playing the five, and really they made like AD could say what he like. AD was making his points about playing the four, but like ultimately, whether it was Frank the last year, Darvin the 2 years, or JJ to start this year, they all played AD to five primarily. Like that's just how it's been. So the Lakers as an organization were like, AD, you could want to play the four. We're going to play you at the five. Or the coaches were just like, these centers are too bad to play two big lineups, so we're going to play AD at the five. But I think like being too cautious about committing to the wrong center. Certainly, you commit to the wrong center, you have like a Yusuf Nurkic in Phoenix situation, and that just kind of messes up your whole position there. The flip side, though, is if you don't commit at all, and you kind of go back in the timeline, it's like, well, they had Brook Lopez, they had Ivica Zubac, they had Dwight and JaVale, and they won a championship, and then they went away from that. They had Marc Gasol, who had the best two-man combination in terms of two bigs with AD of anyone. Then they pissed him off and upset him by bringing in Andre Drummond and starting him over him. They even had Drummond, and then they went away from that. So like, they had some solid options through that like 2017 to 2021 range, and they didn't retain any of them. So yeah, I think they've undervalued it, and it's really cost them the last few years. Michael D, thank you for the super chat, and thank you for the non-basketball question here. So we got sandwich cut straight or diagonally. I would say it depends what sandwich. So we're talking like a sub, of course you cut straight. If we're talking like a PB&J or a smaller sandwich, I prefer diagonally. So I'm kind of taking it out here. I guess like there's something about a diagonal sandwich that's a little bit more satisfying, but I think it depends on what type of bread you are using, what type of sandwich it is. So I hope that answers it. I guess when possible to do diagonal, I prefer diagonal, but there's obviously some sandwiches you can't do diagonal. Jazz_Sing again. Thank you for the super chat. Also, they were missing their two best two-way players. Yeah, they were. And that's I said that at the top. Like, I think them missing DFS and Gabe were two big losses. Like this, two of your three best defenders, to your point, your two best two-way players, those are two big losses. And I know it kind of sounds crazy to be like, well, you can't beat the Jazz without DFS and without Gabe, but like the defense slips a lot. So I will go to 125. So I keep extending it, which is par for the course. Chaco Thunder, why is Mark Williams not active tonight? I don't know. My assumption would be Dalton got the personal game, and he shared tonight that Rob and JJ made that call, and they were like he just got into LA the night before late. He was dealing with a lot of emotions over the past week, and they said like, hey, we're going to give you Monday off. Don't play, take the time. He was still with the group, but you're not playing Monday, come back Wednesday. There could be an element of that with Mark Williams. Like, I think if anyone, I mean, you could make a case like who should be more upset, but I'm sure on some level, Mark Williams is like very upset with this whole situation. Cause I think like he was in line for an extension, like a little bit further into his career. Right. And he'd been playing the best basketball of his career, the 11 games before he got traded, 20 points, 12 rebounds, a block and a half, 50+% shooting. Like Mark Williams was on a tear, and I'm sure at some level he's not happy about getting traded. And so there's part of it. I also think probably for the Hornets, like the second he plays, it kind of undermines, because I don't know if you guys saw some Dallas, there's a Dallas reporter who put out that and I don't even know if like it's a real reporter, so I'm gonna give them. I don't ever want to disparage anyone's reporting, but he said that like apparently he was reporting that Dallas did not give AD a full physical, and they were not aware of how serious his abdominal injury was, and they are now trying to retroactively reverse the trade, which is kind of crazy. And I'm like, so AD already played, Max has played like 5 games, Luka's played twice, and you guys are gonna reverse the trade. So I think for probably for Charlotte too, that there's an element of like, let's try and hold out some hope that if we don't let Mark Williams play, the trade could still be reversed. But that would be like, it's not going to happen, but it would be like the most insane thing if the Lakers got like 2 trades reversed at the deadline. Just insanity. Justine Severo, I'm going to disappoint you with this answer, or maybe not. Ask Jovan, who's your favorite WWE superstar? It's The Rock. To be honest, I was never a big WWE fan. My dad's Serbian, my mom's Puerto Rican. Neither one of them was into wrestling, so they never passed that on to me. But growing up, what's funny is I actually like The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin, and I know, of course, they got their history and their beef, but I would say The Rock. Joe Rogan's father says, good show, Jovan. Thank you. I appreciate that. Joseph McCormick, is Kleba a 4 or a 5? I think he's more of a 5, to be honest, especially because he's a little bit old, like compared to where he was in 2022 for them. He played a lot of 5 for them in 2022, but I think he's even slipped, like injuries, aging. I think he's more of a 5. I think you could probably play Kleba and Jackson together in some lineups, and just he's like the stretch 4 technically, and Jackson's the 5. Defensively, I think it really depends on like the front court, the matchups and stuff. So I think he could technically play both. I would categorize him, I guess, as a 4.5. I know that's kind of splitting the difference, but I think he could play both positions. But I think typically when you are in between positions, you are more of the bigger position than the smaller one. So I lean more 5 for Kleba. The chat is on fire right now. I love it. No one else is in the room. Yeah. So what's funny is like I do often think about, like, it's one thing when I'm doing these streams late in my office. It's another thing when I'm in a hotel room, and I feel bad for the patrons in the other rooms. The snow. This is a good one, and I will probably end it on. Okay, I got another super chat, so I will do a couple of these super chats saying I missed. Okay. Well, let me do this one first. Mint Millions, thank you for the super chat. Luka super slow on offense. I know that's his style of play, but I think we're seeing the Mavs worries, his mentality not there, and he's overweight. I do not want to make any serious proclamations about Luka, 2 games into his Lakers tenure. Like, I just think, I don't know. It's not. Okay, here we go. That should be clearer now. I'm not going to make those proclamations about Luka. I'm gonna, like, again, this was a guy that was averaging 28, 7 and 8 or whatever he was averaging. The Mavs were the number 4 seed before he got injured on Christmas. They dropped to the number 9 seed without him. Like, this guy drives winning. I understand the concerns, but I don't want to make those calls 2 games into it. They've only played Utah. Like, I think, and I feel like as a reporter and as someone around these guys, like, part of what I try to do is share the human element of it. And it's not to make excuses, but it is like Luka said multiple times he did not expect to be traded by the Mavs. He has talked about how this has been like a shock to him. He got asked about Dalton tonight, and he was like, "Yeah, like it's a shock." Like just if he could relate to Dalton, he was like, "Yeah, it's a shock. Like I did expect to be traded. I'm sure he did expect to be traded." Like I think that compared with the or compounded with the injury, I want like he's also on a minutes restriction. Like let's see what if Luka's playing 38 minutes a night and he's struggling and they're playing slow and you still think the mentality's not there, then like let's have that conversation then. But I'm not gonna like I understand why you're concerned and I hear you, but I think it's far too premature to overreact about Luka. All right, the snow asks, what is the most stressful part of your job? I would say there's a couple parts. Like one, as I've built this YouTube channel and this podcast and just this media I'll say media empire that I'm trying to build here with my YouTube channel and Buha's block and the video and audio side. There is a lot of like I think part of the reason why a lot of beat writers don't do this or like it's a lot more work, but I don't mind that. It's more so like I gotta be really careful about what I say, and I get aggregated all the time. Over half the time, it's like misrepresented, or as you guys could know, I kind of tend to sometimes go on rants and I make a point that I'm talking about the same thing for like 5 minutes, and I'm trying to have like a nuanced, analytical, looking at both sides type of breakdown of something. And then an aggregation account will come on here. They will listen to one sentence of what I say and they will clip that and put that out. And it's completely devoid of context. They will sometimes make their own context to it. And then I have no control over like my likeness and what is being put out there. And there are like people that think I've said all these things that I've not said, or again, it's devoid of context. And like, that's a pretty frustrating part of it. But I would say the real like frustrating part of it is like the behind the scenes of like, then people get upset at me and like real people, not just, you know, of course everyone's online is real. There's some bots and stuff, but like more like, you know, people with the team or players or other, you know, whatever. So then I have to like navigate that of like, sometimes it is stuff I said and if I said it and you want to get mad at me, get mad at me. But sometimes it's not stuff I said or it's completely devoid of context. And then it's like, I'm already kind of annoyed that this thing is out there. And then, you know, people are reacting to it when I didn't even say it or mean it. And then there's like actual people that I deal with on a daily basis getting upset at me about what I said. And like that's the tricky part. And there have been times when I'm like, okay, maybe I'm not going to ever talk about this particular topic or whatever again. And like, it's just finding that balance. But I would say that the challenging thing is like, because a lot of people, like you look at the people on TV and no shade at them. And I, you know, I admire and aspire to be like a lot of those people, but most of them don't go in locker rooms. So they can say what they can sit in their chair and say whatever they want. And they don't have to deal with the ramifications. Like maybe someone goes at them on social media, maybe behind the scenes, someone calls them upset, texts them, whatever. But like, if I say something negative about a player, chances are within 24 to 48 hours, I'm going to see that player and that player is going to be aware of what I said. And then I have to deal with the ramifications of that. So that all, you know, that certainly informs the way I approach this, but it's also like I have real ramifications if I say the wrong thing. So I think constantly finding the line of like how I truly feel, what I truly think, and also what I truly know, because sometimes I can't. There are things I've talked about tonight that like I know more detail or know more information on that I can't get into, and I can only share parts of it. So that's like the challenge too, is like how much can I divulge and how much do I have to keep, because I don't want to burn a source or I don't want to make news when it's not really my news to share. Like sometimes I hear things that's like just kind of chatter and it's sort of like, is this real? Is this not? But then also sometimes other reporters or people tell me stuff and then I'm like, it's not really my news to report. So I'm just going to kind of go with like the front facing public knowledge and not really dive into it deeper. So I would say that's the biggest thing. In general, I would say the other thing is just like the hours, the late nights, working holidays, weekends. Like, I have a buddy's wedding in April in Mexico, and one of my closer friends, and would love to be there, but that also might conflict with like the end of the season, like going into the playoffs, and like I think I'm gonna just go, but I've missed bachelor parties, I've missed birthdays, I've missed all this stuff just because of the schedule. And again, it's not a complaint, because I love this and I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. I'm real about it. Like it doesn't mean it like doesn't suck to miss those things, right? Like I have a choice to make. I can put my career first, or I could put social life first, and I will always put my career first for the most part. But it doesn't mean it doesn't hurt, or I don't have like FOMO or whatever when I miss stuff. So those I would say are like probably the two most stressful things with the job. Harry Chinani, thank you for the super chat. Wake up call for us. For those who think we are contenders by adding Luka, far from it. Defense could be an issue. We're only 3.5 games ahead of the play-in. Need to lock in the rest of the way after the break. I don't disagree with anything you're saying here. I would just say, again, the Lakers have been pretty locked in. I think to your wake-up call point, this is a wake-up call and a reminder that, like, one, they need to stay healthy, because I think if Vando goes down, if DFS goes down, Gabe goes down, those three in particular, of course, Luka and LeBron, but like it's kind of like their rotation is so fragile in a way that you need Jackson because he's like really your only playable center. You obviously need LeBron and Luka. Rui might arguably be the most expendable just because you could play more like DFS and Vando. But Rui's your best scoring forward. That's not LeBron or Luka. So like even Rui, and he's shooting the ball so well, and Rui's playing well. I'm not. So like you don't want to lose Rui. Austin's your third best player, and like gives you such an advantage where you can have basically lineups where you have Austin and Luka, Austin and LeBron, Austin by himself, and you're going to be good offensively. So you can't lose Austin. Then you go to the bench, and it's like Gabe's your best point of attack guard. Vando's your best defender, arguably. And then DFS, I think, has been such a leader and such a culture and tone setter for them, and is, I would say, their best two-way player. It's between him and Gabe. So like you can't really lose any of those top 8. I think if you lose any of those top 8, you're kind of in it, like you're playing someone who probably shouldn't be playing, with the exception of maybe Jordan Goodwin, as we see a larger sample size with him, and Dalton. We'll see where he ends. Like I still view him as more the 9th man and not like a necessity, particularly because of the defense. But I think this is a wake up call to show the Lakers how they have a very, to go back to pre-Luka, they still have a relatively slim margin for error. I think the Mark Williams trade would have given them a bigger margin for error, because Mark Williams, like the rim protection stuff was what it was, but he was at least a really good defensive rebounder. And I think right now, I would even say the defensive rebounding is a bigger issue than the rim protection, because I think the Lakers have largely played good defense, and then they can't finish possessions with defensive rebounds. And Mark Williams, as a 7'2", 9'9" standing reach behemoth, helps you there. So that's where I think they really miss out on that trade. But to your point, like they have a slim margin, I think, and that was confirmed again tonight. Then 2 more here. Uwe de Boy, or Wee de Boy. Maybe it's Wee de Boy, or I don't know. I appreciate you. Thank you for the super chat. What is a question you regret asking a player? Oof. It's a good one. It's actually a more recent one. I asked LeBron a question that he had already been asked, but because there was a situation happening behind me and my peripheral hearing went off and I was listening to the situation behind me, I didn't hear the first question of the presser, and then I asked the same question that was the first question of the presser. Interestingly, he actually gave me a good answer. It gave me a better answer than the first question. I think it was like something like, "What are your thoughts?" Like at the milestone moments of the season, I like to just ask like, what are your thoughts at the halfway point of the season? And sometimes those open-ended questions are pretty basic, but it's like kind of shocking how sometimes the more simple and basic the question, as long as it's not like a dumb question or like too much of a narrative question, players will like, you're almost giving them the blank canvas to tell you how they really feel about something. Where sometimes if you put too much context or kind of thought into a question, you're putting almost parameters around how they have to answer it, and then I think sometimes that's when you get shorter. Like it's just amazing to me that like sometimes I've had situations where I'm like thinking about what's the perfect question to ask this player, and I come up with this question that in my head I'm like, this is a great question, this is thoughtful, or often for me I ask a lot of strategy questions, and I'll be like, okay, like this is and then they just don't bite, and they kind of can tell like they don't like it. Then someone asks like, what did you think of this? And then all of a sudden they go on like this 1 minute soliloquy of an answer. And it's like the question, like, or like the answer I was looking for. And it's just, so sometimes actually simpler is better with players. But I asked LeBron the question, and then I was transcribing LeBron that night with the beat writers. We have a transcription docs for every player that speaks. And I was like, I heard the first question. I was like, shit, like I asked basically the same question later, but for the record, he did give me a better answer than the first question. So, like the answer didn't end up being bad, but like I pride myself on paying attention and knowing those things. And like one of the things is you just don't ask the same question again. And that one really like ate at me for a night. Harry Chinani, final one here. Thank you for the super chat. First to 40 points for the All-Star game. Teams can score 40 easily in a quarter these days. I think each game can finish in 10 minutes. LOL. Hope they play more D. I hope so too. And this is a perfect way to wrap this up because, as I said at the top, I will be hosting a Buha's Block meetup on Sunday in Los Angeles, likely in the Mid-City area. There's a couple bars I'm thinking between, trying to see like which one could fit a bigger group. I hope there are a lot of you, but I would just don't want to pick a place where like if it gets over just even into double digits, where it like some bars you can only go with a few people or whatever, and it gets a little tricky. So trying to figure that out. Hopefully we'll have an update on that by Thursday afternoon or at the latest Friday morning, but I will be posting that on YouTube, and I will be posting that on X in terms of meeting up with people. So if you're in the LA area, of course, anyone's welcome to join if you're not in the LA area, but I don't expect you to make it if you're not in the LA area. I would appreciate meeting and seeing all of you and putting faces to names. So, but to Harry's point here, like, yes, these games could go very quickly, especially with the defense played in the All-Star game. And we shall see what that looks like. Maybe they take it more seriously. I hope they do, and we get plenty of time to watch and talk and discuss basketball. And maybe I could share some things that I can't share publicly on the stream. I would say that is a nice benefit of talking in person versus live and publicly. But that will do it for tonight's show. Thank you all so much for watching and listening. I only went over by like 45 minutes, so typical stream for me. But I appreciate you all so much. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I will be back tomorrow, most likely with a vlog and not an episode, potentially an episode, but more likely on Friday. Either way, we're at the All-Star break. Hope you all get some time to decompress. A lot has happened for the Lakers over the past week and a half. I hope you all get some sleep, some rest, and I hope you all join me on Sunday night in the LA area to meet up. But appreciate you all. Shout out to the late night gang. and I'll talk to you all very soon.